What does it take to make a bold move in your business? Our guest today knows a thing or two about taking the leap and going out on your own, and how strong branding and community involvement can fuel success. On this week's episode, you'll hear from Jason Miller, founder of Trust Real Estate Company, St. Cloud, Minnesota's newest real estate firm. With over 20 years in the industry, Jason has seen it all and recently launched his own brokerage. We're diving into his journey, the evolution of real estate, and what it means to take bold steps in business. When Jason reached out to Moxie about his plans for starting his own firm, he wanted a brand that stood out. His approach is modern, bold, and deeply connected to the St. Cloud community. That kind of vision is exactly what Behind the Brand is all about: taking risks, embracing change, and building something truly unique.
Another marketing podcast.
We swore we were never going to do this,
but here we are.
Welcome to Behind the Brand, the podcast for small business owners and aspiring entrepreneurs who are ready to start strong, stand out, and stay bold. Hosted by the powerhouse marketers at Moxie Creative, we're bringing you behind the scenes as we explore what it takes to build and grow a memorable brand. Ready to get behind the brand? Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Brand. We're so happy to have you all here. If you've listened to this episode before, you'll probably recognize my voice. This is Taylor Selno, one of the regular co-hosts. But today I have a new Moxie joining me, Mo Philippi. He's probably the favorite of the Moxies in the Moxie sphere out in the community. Everybody knows Mo. Welcome, Mo.
Thanks for having me. How many episodes are we on?
Well, when this comes out, it will be episode 5. Our podcast producer is telling me.
So I made the top 10 anyways.
Yeah, good job. Yeah, Kelly is out on vacation today, so that's why you get to join us. No, just kidding. The reason that I had Mo sit in on this podcast episode today is because our guest is Jason Miller, who is the owner of Trust Real Estate Co. And Mo and I had the pleasure of working on his brand for his brand new business that he started at the top of 2024. So I thought it would be a really awesome time to get Mo on to share a little bit of the designer side of things as we talk with Jason about his brand. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast,
Thanks
Jason.
for having me, you guys. Yeah.
We're so happy to have you here. I'd love if you could just get started with a little introduction about who you are, maybe why you're here, how you found Moxie, all those things.
Wow, that's an open-ended question that I could fill the rest of your podcast time doing the little bio. So long story short, as you said, my name's Jason Miller. Born and raised in this community, so I always offer that from a professional perspective when I'm engaging with people. Like, I've literally lived my entire life. I was born a mile away from here and went to high school 6 blocks from here. I went to college at St. John's University, got a bachelor's degree there, and then went and got a master's at St. Cloud State. And after 6 years of college and 2 degrees, I decided to go to real estate school for 30 days. So that weaved road that we went down got me to where I'm at. But I got into real estate. This is my 20th year in the business, which sounds weird coming out of my mouth because I still feel 25. But coming out of grad school, I got my license, and I was at one place the entire time of my career. So I was with Premier Real Estate Services starting in 2005, and I've kind of had these personal goals and professional goals that I just always wanted to have creative control over everything when it came to the branding and decision making and where we're going to advertise and how we're going to advocate for our clients and what kind of some of my core values are, not just running a real estate company, not just putting signs in the yards, not just closing transactions, but being active and engaged community members and advocating on behalf of your industry. Those are really important to me. So I had a professional goal about 5 years ago that I was coming into a big project, we'll say, that was going to take about 5 years of my time. And I said, at the end of that, I want to be in a leadership role at some real estate company. And that just really continued to evolve. And I continued to think about, where do I go? Do I stay where I'm at and look at opportunities? Do I jump into like a franchise model that are hiring leadership, management type people? And I've always just promoted and believed in small business. Pre-real estate, I worked in big corporate retail for 10 years. My last company I worked for was AT&T, so you're talking big corporate. That's about as big and corporate as it gets. And I just remember coming out of it, there were some really good things there, but you didn't have any personal creative control. Like if you wanted to move a merchandise rack from one side of your store to the other, you had to go up 4 chains of command to get approval for that, and you probably still weren't going to get approval. So when I got into real estate, I sought out independently owned, locally owned real estate companies, which led me to Premier. And at the end of all of this, like personal look back on what would be important to me when I started my own company, I landed on starting my own from the ground up, not affiliated with a franchise or anything like that. I've been telling people for the last 2 months that I know going into it, it's going to be the path of most resistance, but hopefully in the end with the largest payoff. So that led me to start Trust Real Estate Company on the 1st of this year, and you all helped with that.
Yeah, and it was such a fun process. As you can see, Jason, if you're watching the video,
Yeah.
Jason is fully on brand with his Trust Purple and Blue. From the moment that you came in to meet with us, we could tell that this was going to be a brand that fit our bill of being bold. You weren't going to just kind of take the easy way out or something that felt safe. You wanted really something that was bold, and it was such a fun experience. Okay,
Yeah.
so like you said, you have been a real estate agent for the past 20 years.
Yeah.
And I'd love to just know a little bit, mainly because that means I was 10.
Thanks.
I'd love to know.
I was 11, so not a big deal. Yeah.
I'd love to know a little bit more about like how the industry has evolved
Yeah.
since you came into the real estate business.
It's a great question, and it's a timely question just because I would say so much of the industry has changed even in the last 18 months. So I'll kind of save that. But I am telling people now that I've been through a full real estate cycle in my career. You know, when I got licensed at 2005, was a very high point in the market. There was talk even at the time. I had detractors in my world saying, are you sure you want to get into real estate? Like, there's all this talk about a bubble bursting and things are going to fall apart and it's going to be really, really hard. Well, it helps that I'm stubborn as heck. So, I mean, I looked at it like I'm 25. I've got no responsibilities. I've got no family, no kids, no anything like that. I've got roommates that are helping offset my mortgage costs. Like, I can truly afford to suck for a couple of years. And that was my mindset going into it. And real estate or any small business, I've looked at the statistics and I've preached to everybody that like once you hit that 2-year mark, if you can make it through the first 2 years of learning and growing and kind of going through the painful moments, the snowball will begin to turn faster at that 2-year mark. So, and it was true for me. So the first 2 years were slower. Unfortunately, the market did pop in 2007 into 2008, but for me, that was about my 2-year mark into it. When the market popped and the bubble burst, sure, home values went down, so it wasn't a great time necessarily to be a seller or working with sellers. But this mantra I've always had in my life and in my career is find the opportunity. So when I'm working with agents on my team now, it's what's the opportunity right now? So the opportunity during the recession was it was a fantastic time to be a buyer, and specifically a first-time home buyer, which when you're in real estate and you're in your early and mid-20s, that's your peer group, our first-time buyers, right? So the opportunity were people my age. So I helped people through the recession. I had a lot of hard conversations, like some of the most difficult conversations I had during those years of 2008 to 2012 or 13. We're talking to prospective sellers about, yeah, your home is worth less, 25% less than what you paid for it 6 years ago, and you didn't do anything wrong. Nobody did anything wrong. We're at the mercy of the market.
Yeah.
So having those conversations, and now fast forwarding to years where you're telling people that the first time I had a conversation with someone and they had equity in their house and they were happy, like, man, this is easy. So I
Yeah.
feel like I got some of the hardest facets of my career out of the way early on. So 2014 to 2020, we had some growth, kind of call that more normal, balanced real estate market, working with buyers, working with sellers, and then COVID hit. And that was 2020. And for a couple of reasons, we didn't know what the real estate world was going to look like. I had mentioned at the beginning of this that it was about 2020 where I had set a 5-year goal of being in leadership at a company. Well, that was because I was entering leadership on a volunteer level at our state association of realtors, which culminated with me being the president of the Minnesota Realtors in 2022. So a pretty high level, pretty big commitment volunteer role that had me traveling around the state and the region and the country. So it took a lot of time, great experience, but I was in my first year on that leadership team in 2020. Literally, I'm the treasurer of this big association 2 months in, and COVID hits. And when you're the treasurer, what's your job? The budget.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at like, are realtors going to get out of the business? Are transactions going to stop? I'm literally on a Zoom call with the governor of Minnesota trying to work through making real estate being an essential service. Remember when we had those conversations
Yeah.
about what businesses are essential versus non-essential? He called us on a Friday night when that was about to come out and say, just so you know, I'm about to make real estate non-essential, but I see the value in having real estate continue. If we can work through my concerns, let's get you towards essential. So to the credit of our volunteers and working with the governor over the weekend, by Sunday night, we worked through like, how are we going to handle open houses and home showings and things like that, and deem real estate still essential. So it did. And fortunately it did, because we had our biggest transaction record in Minnesota history in 2020, which is wild to think about what we were all doing in 2020, being stuck at home and forced to not move around. Minnesota set a record for transactions, which was only beat in 2021. So we had 2 consecutive record years of closed transactions in the state of Minnesota. And then we've stabilized, the last couple of years as well. So I've been through a full market cycle where we started high, we bottomed out, and now we've grown back out. And I remember in 2013 saying, we'll never see 2005 prices again. And we did, probably by about 2018, 2019, and we've surpassed that. And now some of the pricing, I'm still involved in volunteerism at the Realtor Association level, both at the local level, the state level, and nationally. And we're talking about housing affordability, right? Which has a lot to do with the price of housing and interest rates. So we used to be able to say like, okay, pricing's really low and rates are modest. And then it was pricing's really low and rates are low. And then it was pricing's going up, but rates are low. Well, now pricing's up and rates are up. So we're going to start to pinch some people out of being able to afford buying a house.
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing is rent isn't going down either.
Right.
So we do a lot of work in that regard. So back to my very initial thought of, we're not just sticking signs in yards and selling houses. We're doing work on behalf of the industry and the people we represent, like working on affordable housing issues in Minnesota specifically is really a core value of what we do.
Yeah. Having been like a very fortunate person, I was able to buy my first home. I think I was 23 and my husband was 24. And I look back on that now and I'm so thankful that we were able to buy when we did, because even if we would have waited 2 years, I don't know what the situation would have been like, especially with where we live. But I will just like say testament to realtors are incredible people. They are so helpful, and they, if you find the right one, right? Exactly. Yeah. There's, you've said this to me a few times, like sometimes it can be kind of a dime a dozen. Everybody wants to be a realtor these days. But if you find the right one, they really can be totally on your side. And I know, Mo, you've probably had very similar experiences having purchased a few homes.
Yeah. I think I bought my first house at 33. Yeah, the prices were way lower than they are now, and we sold, and we had a lot of equity in our house when we sold. We've been in our second house now for 6 years, I think. So yeah.
Missy told me on Saturday they have no intention of leaving either.
She's
Locked into that interest rate.
Yeah.
She looks every day, I think.
So does Tyler.
She wants something else, but
well, someday.
Yeah.
So we talked about this kind of in your introduction. You were with a brokerage for 20 years, and now you have started out with trust, and clearly you have been through a lot in your career, lots of different cycles like you just described. What was kind of the like, yes, I'm doing this, and I'm gonna go all in on myself, on building my own business? What was that really big like deciding factor? Because it's big and scary to make that decision.
It was from the standpoint of starting over, right? So I had spent a year, 2 years kind of just casually having conversations with my peer group, with clients and colleagues, and just people in general, like, do you care about the name of the real estate company, or are you searching out, like, this is my realtor, like, and I guess he just happens to work for XYZ Realty or whatever the case is. And that ends up being the case more often than not. And I've tracked every transaction I've ever done in my career, and the bulk of the time people are referred to me, my name, not the company behind my name. So it got to be one of those things where, okay, that scary part is over. And most people, frankly, leave any employer, well, it's a real estate brokerage or wherever they're at, because they're unhappy for some reason. And I put out a video the first of the year announcing my, transition. And I said I left a place I loved. I loved the people. I loved everything it stood for. I loved their values. I loved what they've done for me. So I didn't leave because I was unhappy. I left just because I've had this calling to do my own thing. And at 20 years in my business, at the age I'm at, I've got the experience now, and I still have the energy to take this on, even though to the client experience, everything is basically the same. There's a lot of behind the scenes startup administrative red tape that you just have to get into place over your first year to 18 months that you have to have the energy for to do, not when you're working with clients. So I had the energy for it, I had the passion for it, it excites me. I think I told you when we first sat down that it's the most excited I'd been in a couple of years. Not that I wasn't enjoying my career, but this was just this new charge. And even getting into real estate, I think the people that succeed thrive on the uncertainty. Like there's no, when a new person comes to me and says, I'm thinking about getting into real estate, the first thing I say to them is, what are your thoughts on a career with no salary and no benefits? And then let's talk, right? Like there's no guarantee, nothing. But I thrive off that. Like I look in the mirror and say, okay, if you want to make something happen today, there's the person who's going to do it. If things don't go well, there's the person who's responsible for it. So it's completely self-made. And what we hope to do is offer some support and some guidance and some resources to help you do better and accelerate at that. But ultimately, it's up to you whether you're going to be successful in this business or not, like most.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting that's your take. And I love if I mess up, like it's on me, it's not on anyone else. Because sometimes you get into places where like you have a team or you're part of a team. And I know with real estate, you have teams, and not in like the corporate sense, right? And it is easy sometimes for a shitty team member to be like, well, that was Mo's fault, you know, and really like it was actually my fault. So it's a very different perspective, a different world to be in real estate. So now I'd love to just talk more about like the branding and the marketing side of real estate. If anybody has spent time in St. Cloud or, you know, just driven down the streets, you can see kind of a realtor billboard every other billboard, right? And there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of real estate companies. And like you said, you know, maybe people are more drawn to the person itself, not necessarily the company. You know, they don't, you know, I know what company my realtor works for, but like, I don't know totally what that means, right? But I do feel like you're trying to do something a little bit different with trust. So I'd love to know, you know, where the name came from, how, you know, what that means to you, and how you're, you know, maybe just doing things differently on the business side of things.
Yeah, I was telling people I kind of called it my Jerry Maguire moment, right? Where, again, I love everything about Premier, what it stood for. And I think part of the reason I was so invested in the company is I was there from the early stages of that company being created too. So I feel like I was there from almost the beginning, not entirely the beginning, but I was about agent number 10. And at its peak, we had 100 agents. So I really watched the evolution of this company go from this cute boutique mom and pop to this community monster where we were the number one producing company for over a decade. So, I mean, I went from being on like a farm team to the Yankees is what it felt like. So watching that evolution, and I thought that was a fantastic thing. So for me, it was one of those where it was like, I just want to be my brand, and that's not saying take away anything from that, because I built my career on the reputation of Premier Real Estate. So I looked at that and said, if I ever do my thing, I want to do it the same way they did it. They, again, were invested in their community. They took a really good care of their clients. It was a respectable name. Like, people respected that brand. You weren't ever going to see that ad during the Super Bowl, but you were going to see them at the community event that your kids were at, or they were sponsoring your kids' baseball team or swim team or whatever the case is, or the gala you were at. And to me, that was really, really important, because real estate is so localized, neighborhood by neighborhood. I was just telling a client last week that the conversation I'm having with you today about how long your house is going to sit on the market and what our strategy is going to be is completely different from the house I was at yesterday, 1 mile away. Like, that's how individualized it is, and you have to really have a neighborhood expert. So to me, that was really, really important in terms of kind of creating a brand that was locally owned. And then, you know, the word trust, where that came from, I'd been racking my brain. Like, I'm a perfectionist to a fault. And it was like, I can't launch this company until I have just absolutely the perfect name. And I'd been rattling things around and just kind of spitballing core ideas and values and important things we were at. And actually, I was at a seminar at a conference, a real estate conference last October, I think it was. And the keynote speaker, the book he wrote, and the entire concept of his speech was this concept of trust. And everything came down to, we always hear that people work with people they like, but in reality, they don't even have to like you. But if they trust you, that's at the core of like the decision they're going to make to work with you as a person. And listen to any ad on the radio, on TV. I bet you won't go 3 ads with hearing the word trust somewhere in their pitch about their company, whether it's medical or accounting or HVAC or whatever it is. They're the trusted this or the trusted that. So that word's just so prevalent. And my thought was, if it's so prevalent, let's just put it out there. Like, we're working every single day to earn your trust, and now it's going to be the name of our company.
Yeah, I love it. I know we met We kind of started having conversations, I think, in November,
Yeah.
right before Thanksgiving. And I think that was pretty soon after you had come back from that conference.
It was.
And you had said, this is kind of the name that I'm thinking about. And you were like, but I'm not sure, maybe it'll be something different. If you guys can think of any ideas, whatever. And, we said, okay, yeah, sure, we absolutely can. And then when we picked things back up in January, it was just like, nope, we don't need to have any conversations about name storming. Like, trust is it. That's what it is. And I know I was like, okay, that is going to be great. I felt like it's just such a balanced word, from a designer standpoint. Did
Yeah,
you feel
as a
kind of the same
designer,
way?
I picture words in my head when I'm coming up with branding and logos and stuff, and I just immediately was like, oh, that's a nice looking word. It's 5, there's a centered letter and 2 T's on the end. It just seemed like, oh, this will be a good base to start with for something that's going to look good.
Yeah, you said that at our meeting, and I'm like, okay, sounds good to me. I have no idea. I don't look at it from that frame of reference. But even, for me, it was so fun when you showed concepts of logo creation and brands and things like the difference between trust in all capitals versus trust in all lowercase, which is what we used, and how one looks like really in your face and one looks a little more inviting. So I had never been a part of that process, and quite frankly, for me, that was so fun. And that's why I've said with any of this, if I'm going to have something as important as creating my own brand for the very first time, I'm finding the best company to do it. I'm finding the experts. I'm not going to chintz out online or go this other route. Like, I'm going to the people who are in my community and neighbors who now quite literally are 3 doors down from me,
Yes.
that if I have a question or need help with something, I can go to them. So that's how I found you, and I'm awfully thankful that I did.
Yeah, well, we're awfully thankful that you did. We hosted Chamber at the end of January, and it was so fun because I think it was a Friday, and I think we gave you your logo files on Wednesday.
We did.
And that weekend, you walk into Chamber with the exact sweatshirt that you're wearing today,
Yeah.
and we were just like, holy shit. Like, that is the fastest brand turnaround I think we've ever seen from a client's perspective. But it just felt so real for us, and we were like, wow, that is a sharp, awesome logo. And you got up and said, this might look like a simple logo put on a shirt. It's the word trust, and there's a line here, and it might look simple, but the process is not simple to get there, right?
Yeah.
It would go through rounds and rounds and rounds to get to the end result. And it takes a lot of feedback from you as the client,
Yep.
a lot of collaboration internally, and then, meeting back with you. So thank you to you just for being along with that process. I've said it in a few of our other episodes, but
And also trusting us with, your vision, I think.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I like about our process is, we get to work with you and we try to make this brand, it's your baby. We want it to be a part of you and make it collaborative with you,
Yeah, and I'll be honest, because we had talked a little before our first sit-down meeting about brand concepts, and you had given me some things to think about that I wanted to bring to the table, and I walked up the stairs that day thinking, I'm not going to give them anything to work with. How are they going to come? Just a guy who, works in real estate. But you ask questions, you got to know me, and then we talked things about colors. So the colors in here even are very, very intentional.
yeah, they came from a shirt that you wore to that meeting.
They did.
There has never been a more Jason Miller color palette than
Yeah.
the Trust color palette.
But it wasn't just the shirt, right? Both the blue and the purple have very deep meanings
Yeah.
to me personally. They have very personal ties. And to your point about it looks so simple at the end, our round concept books that you created for me with different concepts and ideas, I'll keep them forever. One, because it was fun just to see that, but it's a really good illustration for me, the same conversations I have with our clients, especially while the market's been so hot the last few years, that a lot of times people will look at the work of a realtor. Have you stuck a sign in the yard, the house sold the first day it went on the market, and then you collected a check at the end?
Yeah.
Well, people could look at this logo and say, okay, you wrote some letters and you made this color purple and you put a roof line over it and you were done. And by far, that wasn't what went into
No.
all of this. By far, that wasn't what went into the process of getting a house ready for the market and guiding you through putting your house on the market and getting an offer on it and negotiating that offer. Then everything happens from the offer to the closing table. So both for consumers, but even more so for my agents that I work with, as a visual reminder, here's the 175 things that you do in every single real estate transaction. So if you're ever feeling like this is easy or if there's some outside noise chirping at you, you don't really do a whole lot, here's everything you do in every single deal. And I think that's really important to remember. And it was the same thing with this brand creation is the product at the end looks simple, but we went through a lot to get there. So I think the visual reminder of those books is something, like I said, that I'll hang on to forever.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
That
that's
makes me so
awesome.
happy. The branding process has become one of my absolute favorite things to do. You know, Mo, I know you've been designing logos and building brands for years and years, but I've only been working in the agency world for 4 years. And really, when we started Moxie is when I got to sit in on these big branding, these big brand development type things. And they've just become one of my favorites. And this is exactly the reason why, everything you just said there. One of the last things that I want to touch on with you is the role that the community, especially, you know, the greater St. Cloud community, plays in your business and your decision making, because I think that you are one of the most involved community members that we have, or, you know, at least that we have in our client Rolodex. And it's something that's really cool to me, especially as we are trying as a team to become more involved in the community. And I think we're doing a pretty bang up job of it, but it's become something that's really important to us too. You know, we wouldn't be where we are without the support of our community members. I think you feel, you know, a lot of the same there. So I just love to hear a little bit more about your experience and insight on that.
Well, I'll prop up my industry as a whole first. There's statistics out there that show that realtors as an industry give back more of their time than any other collective industry out there. I just think by nature we're people. We want to be involved. We want to help. Like, that's at the core of our job and what we do. So I think my industry and my flexibility and my schedule affords that to me. But
Yeah.
I also think on the flip side, that's part of the reason I sought out an industry like real estate, is I would have the flexibility to do those things that are still important to me. So to your point, I've been volunteering like at a local level with our Chamber of Commerce apparently since you were like 8 years old. So I did the math this week, and I went to my first Friday morning chamber meeting when I was 21, which is in 2001. So I've been going for almost 24 years, or about
Crazy.
24 years. This community is so unique in that regard. You know, so people who have never been to the Friday morning chamber, when they come for the first time, it's so fun for me to see it through their eyes that there's this Friday morning monster that averages 130 people every single week,
So
every
many
single
people.
Friday.
I was not prepared for that when we presented. I was
Yeah.
like,
And
is
it's at
going on?
7 a.m. on a Friday, and
Yeah.
if you're not a morning person, like the energy that you come out of that meeting with. So, and I was fortunate enough to have chaired that committee, ironically, also during COVID. So I was the COVID chair of 2020 and 2021. So talk about the word of COVID of pivoting. We had to pivot and put that on a virtual platform
Yeah.
to continue to make sure that it existed during COVID. So we were hosting Friday morning chamber COVID meetings with 100 people on the Brady Bunch Zoom screen. So that was a fun, unique experience that we can now laugh about that it's over.
Yeah.
But it's been important. So again, growing up here, I was raised by parents who said, you don't have the right to complain about something if you're not involved in the process.
Love it.
So I watched my dad be involved with things at a very early age. He was involved in his industry at the company he worked for. He was involved in the school board where I went to school, at a private school in town. So he was just very involved in the process, and then felt like, okay, I can contribute. If I have a concern, I can raise that, but I'm now a part of it. I'm not just on the sidelines barking that you're not doing this and you're not doing this. So that was a pretty core value that was instilled in me from a very early age. So regardless of what I've done, I've jumped in with both feet. Like I said, I got involved in volunteerism at the realtor level, I think in my second year at the business, on our local board of directors. And now fast forward 20 years, and I'm on the board of directors again for our local association of realtors, the state association of realtors, and the national association of realtors, all at the same time right now. So those are national things I do, but locally, you know, we've talked about some of the chamber stuff that I've done, which was really important to me. I've invested heavily my time and energy into the March of Dimes when they had a big presence in St. Cloud. Part of the reason that I carry the purple with me still. I just got looped in to a new endeavor working with the Children's Museum downtown.
Oh, I love that.
I grew up in a daycare house, so I've always had an affinity for anything that has to do with kids. So when the opportunity came and they asked me to get involved there, I said absolutely, even though mine are preteen and teen now. But that was exciting for me. I mean, I did like the Dancing with Our Stars event a couple of weeks ago. So if it's anything to kind of prop up Central Minnesota and put St. Cloud in a positive light, I'm first in line to do that, because I've lived here my entire life. And I tell my clients, like, one of the things about hiring me is I'm not going to list your house today and be gone in 2 years when you need help with something. Like, I'm not going anywhere. And I've got a lot of working years ahead of me. So you can count on that I'll be there today. And if you need help and if there's a problem, I'm going to be there for you.
Yeah, I love it. I think, Mo and I both live in central Minnesota. I don't live necessarily right in kind of the greater St. Cloud area, but live out in rural central Minnesota. And this area really is a special place. I did not grow up here. I grew up kind of closer to Mankato, and the vibes are different, right? And there is really something really special about this. And it is a lot in part to community members like you who work to make it a better place. So thank you for all that you do here.
And we are the same age. I've only been going to chamber for like a year and a half now.
Yeah.
It is an incredible thing. I would recommend it to anybody who wants to get involved in something or has a business to come to chamber, because it has been really great for us. And I mean, we sort of knew each other a little bit from the brewery and stuff.
Yeah.
And we didn't interact too much at chamber, but then I knew who you were when you came in and stuff, and just the networking and seeing all the business owners and stuff in St. Cloud. It's just a great place to.
Well, and talking about how Central Minnesota is this network, like, kudos to you, because I graduated high school with Aaron Reeland from Bad Habit, right? So I always going in there since they've opened, like, they have the most incredible badass branding in their shop, on their cans. Like, it's incredible.
That's Mo.
That's Mo. I'm like, well, then that guy is going to be involved in creating my logo. So I want badass branding too.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Kudos. Like, that was that small. I tell everyone, like, there's your Stearns County story of the day. Like, everybody has a Stearns County story where someone has some connection to someone. So that was another fun connection for me, to weave my way to you guys. And it was a part of that. That was just another one of those, like, okay, things are falling into place and I'm in the right spot. And, like, now, quite literally, my office door is 3 doors down from you guys. And that's another thing about St. Cloud. I always feel like we're the punching bag a lot of times.
Yeah.
And people rag on downtown. And, social media can be a great tool for promoting your business, but it can also be a cesspool. And I would challenge the people who complain on social media about the downtown community. Have you been downtown recently? Have you walked around? Have you gone into one of these great shops or restaurants? Like, even the backdrop, like, part of what draws me down here are these yellow bricks that were created in this community. I just love these buildings. So when I walked through spaces and found an office suite that had yellow brick on the backdrop of my office, I'm like, that's where I want to park. I've talked the talk a long time about going downtown, and now I'm quite literally putting my business there.
Yeah, I love that. When you had mentioned you were thinking about coming down here, I thought that was so cool. One, because it's growing. There is a lot of things happening down here. But two, there's no other real estate footprint downtown.
Not. Yeah, I think we're the only real estate brokerage with an office space in downtown St. Cloud.
Yeah, which is that's so cool.
Yeah,
I love that. Having your presence down here is definitely needed and exciting.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, with that, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's always fun to chat with you, and fun to chat in a little bit of a different way.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
You have such an incredible journey, having been in the industry for 20 years, and we're so proud and excited for you as you've, launched Trust in the start of 2025. And your story is really proof that real estate is more than just a transaction. There is branding, relationships. It's about supporting communities and really being willing to take bold steps in the best interest of your clients. So thank you for all that you do. Before you leave us, we really like to ask our guests 2 questions just to kind of tie everything together from episode to episode. But I know I've learned a lot just in these 2 questions that we've been asking. So if you're ready, I'll get started.
Hit me.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go.
So first up, what is your go-to business tip for others thinking about starting a business?
Well, especially if you're starting a business, because there's no one that's going to tell you when to report to work, what to do, what tasks to take on. And that was maybe the most telling thing for me when I got into real estate, specifically coming out of retail, where you report at this time, you stay there until this time, here's the tasks that you need to perform today. So one of the best tips that I got when I started out in real estate, and I think it relates to any small business that you're starting on your own, is even if you don't have tasks to do that day, like, treat it like a minimum of a 9 to 5 job. Like, report to an office space. I was a big still go to the office person my entire career.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I still have a footprint, even though a lot of, realtors will work from home or coffee shops or wherever. Like, I need to go to work to report to work, and 20 years later, I'm still doing that. So even if you don't feel like, I don't have anything to do today, like, create things to do or be involved. Or like when new realtors come to us, I'm having them do the activities of real estate, even if they don't have clients right away, like walking through houses as previews, getting to know floor plans and some of the terminology, or working on contracts. So that way, when the time comes, you're really actually ready to do it. So, commit to it, even if you don't think you have something to do today. Treat it like, again, a minimum of a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah, I love that. We work a hybrid model here. Mondays we work from home. Well, you don't. Usually you come in, but
Yeah.
I do. And then Fridays are, sometimes we're here, sometimes we're not. But I love the Tuesday through Thursday that we're in the office. I feel like I get the most done. Maybe not as much writing, because sometimes we're in and out of people's office. But it is really nice to have that like foundation that I know I show up at this time, I leave at this time. It does make a difference. So I love that. And then last, what's one piece of advice you've received that's made a difference?
I heard this also at a conference. Like, I'm really big into these little buzzwords or catchphrases or something like that. So this whole concept of done is better than perfect has resonated with me. At least I've tried to. I'm perfectionist to a fault, like I've mentioned before. So, but just the concept of going out there and doing it. Like, I think I would have paralyzed myself at the thought of launching this company on my own, because not every facet was perfect on day one. So I really did. I mean, I was intentional about it. I charted out a plan, and I said, okay, here's the things that have to be done. And even that was working with you, like the 3 to 6 months before. But then it was also like the first 100 days. Like, what are the things that can fall into place? And what are the things that you're just going to stumble upon 18 months from now that's like, oh, yeah, I need to flip that over, well, whether it's a logo or some kind of terminology or something. So getting out of your own way, like looking at the positive side of things, the whole, like I said, done is better than perfect. I heard that in relation once to social media content, the people who are paralyzed by like putting out a video because it's not like this professional high level video. And some of the greatest engagement comes from turning your phone around, right? So I think we talked, so that's what I did.
Authenticity, right?
When I did the video of launching my company, it was literally on New Year's Day. I had just driven home from cleaning out my former office. I'm sitting in my car in my garage, kind of mentally spent and excited all at the same time. But I'm like, I'm just going to flip the camera around and tell my friends, the world, what's happening. So I took my phone and I flipped it around and I rambled for about 3 minutes, and I posted it on social media. And I think to this day, on any professional post I've ever put out, whether I've paid someone or not, it's the most engagement I ever got, because it's the most real I've probably ever been.
Yeah.
It certainly wasn't perfect. It wasn't edited. It wasn't clean, but it was just me talking to my friends and clients and people that I know through a camera.
Yeah, I love that. Authenticity can move mountains.
Right.
That's for sure. Well, those are really great tips. Thanks, Jason. I was about to say thanks, Mo, but thanks, Jason.
You can thank me too.
yeah.
I haven't done much for this podcast, but
You sat there and looked
Yeah.
pretty
You
with
did-
those big
you did
blue
that.
eyes.
I'm here for
Here's your
support, yeah.
thanks. Right.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, with that, we will end this week's episode of Behind the Brand. I just want to say thank you again, Jason Miller from Trust Real Estate Company, for sitting with us today and sharing a little bit more about your business and your experience in the branding process. It really means a lot that you gave us your little bit of your time today. So if you're out there listening and Jason's story resonates with you, I would love for you to ask yourself, what bold move could you make in your business? Whether it's refining your branding, stepping up your marketing, or taking the leap into something completely new, let this be the sign to just go for it. Like I said, progress is better than perfection, right? So we will see you next week on another episode of Behind the Brand.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Behind the Brand. If you like this episode, share it with a friend. If you didn't, share it with an enemy. To keep up with us, follow along on our socials. Links are in the show notes below.